In T-minus 3, 2, 1, we begin the fun. Touring our way through the NBA from that big apple to the place by the bay. Is your mind buckled in? Because it's time to begin. Sekou and his friends are doing it again. The Hang Time Podcast is the spot, so sit back, relax, because the show's about to drop.
Welcome into another edition of the Hang Time Podcast. I'm your host, Sekou Smith, here in Atlanta, sheltering in place during the global pandemic. That is the coronavirus. And our guest is a guy who's a Hall of Famer, a living legend, one of the greatest players that basketball has ever seen. And all of a sudden, one of the most talked about names in the game with the Last Dance out and all of the headlines that come along with that. Isiah Thomas joined us here on the Hang Time Podcast. Isiah, good morning. And how are you? How's the fam? How's everybody dealing through this global pandemic in terms of just adjusting to this new normal?
Everybody's doing well. As you know, my daughter tested positive a while back. However, she's on the other side of it now, exercising, doing well, and back to work selling Sherline champagne. So I'm happy that we're all happy and safe, and I hope everybody else is happy and safe also.
No doubt. I don't even know how it must feel to be caught up in the current swirl of headlines and stories, involving the Last Dance, the documentary about Michael Jordan and Chicago Bulls and their last championship season. Has it been odd for you to have all of these things kind of raked back up and stirred up again in the media, even just, all of the back and forth, people's opinions and comments about something that happened so long ago for you?
It definitely has been. It wasn't expected. I would say that, I like most of you and everybody else, when they announced that the documentary was being fast-tracked and was going to be shown, me and my family, we was anxious to see sports or have something talked about sports, but we didn't know that the Pistons and myself would be so intertwined in this story. We just thought that we were getting ready to watch a doc about Mike, and that was going to be it. But I will say this, the one thing that I think has happened, which is I think has been good for the Pistons, I think people are now starting to go back and examine the way we were as a basketball team, and really starting to ask, can they watch some of our games? Mm-hmm. If you notice, none of our games have ever been shown on air, I think, for like the last 20, 25 years. So people have seen a couple of video clips showing hard fouls and then some narrative behind that and say, oh, that's how the Pistons played. But I think now that people are actually getting the chance to see us play or curious about us playing, I think they're coming away with a different outlook in terms of how we played the game and how good we were defensively and offensively.
Yeah, I'm biased. I'm born and raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan, so I grew up in Bad Boys country, and I watched Pistons games before, believe it or not, all of that persona was pumped out, worldwide. Like, you watched a great team. I remember coming to the Silverdome to watch games, which I know not everybody understands the history of that franchise in that way. The quality of play has come into debate by a lot of people. I'm kind of shocked at people's idea that the game has transformed and become so much better in this day and age than it was then. I don't get that feeling. You've played, coached, analyzed the game all these years. What does it look like to you watching that old film in terms of the quality of play that you guys were putting on display?
I think that's the best thing that has come out of this doc for the Pistons. Because people people just assumed that we were, a team that fouled everyone. But when you look at the 80s, and I think now people are really starting to do a critical examination and critique of the 80s, and they talk about pace. Well, lo and behold, the 80s pace was faster than the 2020 pace or the 2010 pace, and the level of scoring and everything else during that period of time, they're just starting to get back to that level of scoring today in the NBA. So I'm pleased that people are having a chance to go back and look at the Pistons, and I think they just stumbled onto that. We were the team that had the highest scoring record in the NBA and still holds that today. And when you look back at the 80s, we were one of the highest scoring teams. And defensively, we were just a juggernaut. So, comparing the two eras, I think people are realizing that when people say the 80s was a great era of play, now the numbers and the stats are backing that up.
Yeah. I do want to point out, I know there's been a lot made about, you and Michael Jordan, but I thought watching the doc last week, he paid you a very high compliment, when he said that, hey, you are right there after Magic is the greatest point guards the game's ever seen, which I think a lot of us feel that way, that you don't get your due in that respect. I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised, given all of the other things that have been said, that he showed you that kind of respect. And I know you've always respected his game. And in the times I've talked to you, rarely that we've discussed Jordan, because I don't think it's that big a deal to some of us all these years later. But there is a healthy dose of respect amongst you guys, which I think is often glossed over when these things get brought up. What did you think about what he said when he called you the second best point guard the game's ever seen?
Well, I was, of course, you're always pleased to hear someone compliment you like that, particularly someone who is in the discussion of the greatest player to ever play. He's in that debate, right. Whether it be him, Kareem, or LeBron. It's only, Russell and Chambers, only 5 of them guys in the room. You know what I mean? So for one of those guys to acknowledge your play, that's a high compliment. So, again, what he's done for the game in the way that I think all of us have admired him in the way he's played, it was good to hear him say that.
Yep. I think if there's any takeaway from it too, like I've watched, some other guys talk about it, to know that you were in the minds of a team you competed against as much and as deep as the Pistons were and the Bulls, that cracks me up, because you don't notice at the time whether you get into them or not, whether you got that number, whether you own them like you think they. And then to hear them talk about it now in retrospect, like, wow, y'all had the whole city of Chicago caught up. I mean,
again, we always described ourselves as a mentally tough team, while the media always described us as a physically tough team. And I was taught at a very young age in the game, mental is the physical as 4 is to 1. And when you're out competing, if you can out scheme a team or make them think differently about themselves or lack confidence in themselves or lose trust, or those things are what you're trying to gain an edge on in terms of competition, particularly when you're playing against someone who is physically more gifted than you. So we as smaller players, and myself as a smaller player, I wasn't gifted, like Magic was at 6'9", Larry Bird, 6'8", 6'9", Jordan 6'6" with a 49-inch vertical. When you're not gifted with those things, you still have to find a way to compete. And, I always prided myself in, while those guys could play above the rim, my below the rim game had to be extremely effective to just make sure that we can compete.
Well, you didn't miss any steps. Trust me. And it's been fun watching some of those old clips of just all of the competitive, atmosphere of that era. I do miss that. But what I really was curious about watching the doc, watching, some of the other things, and then thinking about the history that you've had since you stopped playing. And I tell people all the time when they ask me about my time covering the league, what did I enjoy most? I'll never be able to pay you back for allowing me to watch and observe that Pacers team I covered my first time covering NBA when you were the coach. And you just bringing us in and explaining to us what y'all were doing, why y'all were doing it, the system were implementing. I always feel like you got short shrift in the coaching space more than anything. I don't think people have ever recognized just how forward thinking your coaching was. I always tell people about the quick and that you had an offense that was basically today's standard NBA offense that you were trying to implement in the early 2000s, and nobody was paying attention and nobody was acknowledging that. What did you see at that time when you got into coaching that led you to believe this was the right vision for what the game will become in the future?
Well, when you say no one was paying attention, I would say, well, a lot of coaches were, because a lot of them actually used everything that we started there in Indiana. And, if you look at the way a lot of those teams play, and even the names of the play calls are, the same calls that we had there in Indiana. Mm-hmm. And I always, and I will hold true to this day. Had I been given the opportunity to finish what I started at Indiana, I firmly believe we would have won a championship with that team. Mm-hmm. Jermaine O'Neal and I were talking about that the other night. Just how close we were as a team and a unit, and how we were progressing. The other night they had that New Jersey game on with Reggie Miller. Mm-hmm. And I looked at that New Jersey team, and they went to the finals back to back 2 years in a row. We lost to them that first year as the 8th seed, but we had them beat. And Reggie missed a free throw. Crozier went to the line, missed 2 free throws. And that point in the game, those were big points in the game. Now, Reggie came back and made up for it, as he always does and did. But, we had that team right on the edge. And that was our first year together, our second year together. So when you look at the innovativeness that we were, that we were having as a basketball team, and the extension of the 3-point line, playing up tempo, our open set. Our open set, if you ask any of our players who played back then, our open set had never been done in the NBA. Well, our open set now is the standard play of the NBA, where they take the power forward and they move them to the perimeter.
It's just crazy. I mean, it's like I said, when I said nobody's paying attention, I didn't mean basketball people. I meant media. I was pointing the finger at folks on my side of the aisle. I remember having arguments with people about it, and they were like, that's not going to work in this league. And I thought to myself, if you don't have a forward-thinking program, if you jump into the league and just do what everybody else is doing, then that means you got to have talent that's superior to what everybody else, has. And that's where I'm interested in your eye. You've always had a great eye for talent.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I think that year we started off 15-2,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It's just weird. I mean, looking back at it historically, I don't understand what everybody else was missing because I thought it was fascinating to watch. But that eye for talent, you've always had it. You go back and look at the drafts and all of the players you've identified that have gone on to long careers in this league. Where does that come from? Being able to walk into a gym and eyeball certain players that just have it.
They say that the truest form of education is participation in observation. And if you have participated in any type of studies and then you have a chance to observe it, then you have a more critical eye of critiquing because you have immersed yourself into the situation. So your understanding and education and perspective is different than one who may have only participated in one of those learning categories. And I always felt that because I participated in the sport and then I became a champion in the sport, and then having the chance to observe the sport from every angle, just gave me I believe it just gave me more of an educational perspective in terms of who and what I was looking for, and was able to look at different places, how this person would fit in the locker room, the training table, the bus, so forth and so on. So all those things came into play, not just from a talent standpoint, but also from an understanding of what the player was going to walk through, was going to have to walk through in terms of the shoes that he was going to have to wear on a daily basis. And I think that helped me tremendously in my evaluation.
You've had a career as well, Isiah, that I've always been curious about the connection you have with players from different generations. Like I know that you mentioned talking to J.O. the other day, and I know the guys who have played for you or have been in your orbit have always been fiercely loyal and appreciative of the mentorship that you've given them. At what point in your career, and I know you were active as a player, so I'm assuming it goes back a ways, but at what point in your career did you realize I got to be more than just a player? I have to be more than just a coach or a team president or GM. Like, I have to mentor these other guys who are going to take this walk from wherever they started in their basketball careers to where you are now.
I would say that started like in grade school and just in my family and my household, watching my mom and dad in terms of the way that they were trying to raise me. And even when my dad and my mom separated, my mom was always looking to help someone. And there were a lot of days we didn't have food. And when we did get some food, she would invite somebody over to eat. And we're like, what are you doing? She'd be like, well, such and such down the street, they don't have nothing. And we would be like, well, we don't have nothing either. And we just got this. But I would say, watching her and watching my dad just always, trying to give advice around the neighborhood, trying to help people. That just became a part of who I am. And I always have just tried to pass knowledge, give knowledge, help people. And if I've made any mistakes, open up my book and let people learn from the mistakes that I've made so they don't make those mistakes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm always, like I said, I'm always interested to see the reaction players have when they see you or when they greet you. It's different. Different than it is for the average guy who's been through the league. And that's not a knock on anybody else. That's just the observation. What do you make of this new G League component and top high school guys have an opportunity to go to the G League instead of college and spend a year there before they enter the draft. Somebody was asking me about it yesterday. The capitalist in me loves it, like the idea that you would have that freedom to choose. But I don't know. I mean, we haven't. I don't know if we have a good handle on how this changes the landscape just yet.
You know, I think there'll be some successes and there'll be some failures, and I would, you know, this year with coronavirus and the potential that there may be a year loss to the NC2A in terms of playing, it may be a smart move to go to the G League right now and take the money. But the risk of, and I've always said that the risk of a 17-year-old, you know, teenager playing against a 27, 28-year-old man who's and they both have an NBA dream. Unless that 17-year-old is head and shoulders over that 27-year-old man, athletically, physically, that 27-year-old man most of the time is going to beat that 17-year-old kid. And that's, so you know, like I say, there'll be some successes and there'll be some failures, but it won't be a slam dunk by any means, and it won't be a layup. There's going to be some ups and downs for the players. Now, financially, it's a win. It's a win for the player, any way you look at it financially.
Right. I wonder too what the biggest emphasis is going to be. You know, everybody has got dollar signs in their eyes, but then I think about the finite amount of years you have to play. You know, and does that financial windfall that you get when you're playing, it doesn't always translate to you making the best decisions when you're done playing. How did you steel yourself to be prepared for the business that you've done since you stopped playing? Like, how did you prepare yourself for that part of the game?
You know, I've always been a seeker of knowledge. You know, I've always been someone who was curious and always read a lot and wanted to participate. So truly, I've touched every part of basketball, from an executive, from an ownership, from broadcasting to playing to winning. There's not a part of the NBA that I haven't physically touched or worked in. And the preparation truly just came from my participation in the sport. And when you're participating, you know, you, as opposed to just having a trainer, you know, tape your ankle, you say, "Hey man, how you do that?"
Right.
Right. You get to know the trainer. You get to know, you know, how he thinks and what makes a good trainer or a bad trainer. So you have those conversations. Now, when you're having those conversations, I wasn't thinking that one day I would be an executive having to hire someone in that position, but it was more or less just like, you know, just talking and getting to know someone and you know, understanding what it's like to walk in another man's shoes, so you can, you know, you go in and you get on the training table and you never thought to think that, okay, well, maybe the trainer's having a bad day. Maybe, you know, maybe something happened at home with his family and kids, and, you know, maybe he's upset. So I always just try to make it a two-way street instead of just a one-way street with everybody I meet.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That journey is so interesting to me to see guys now when they're done playing and how they manage the post-playing career. What kind of advice are young guys asking you now? You know, guys in the league, when you bump into them and they want some words of wisdom, what are they asking about? What are these current players who make? When you look at the amounts of money being made by players today, it's staggering. You know, they're walking corporations. But what knowledge are they seeking from you when they talk to you?
financial advice in terms of how to save their money, and in the relationship they should have, with their agent, representation manager. Those are the two main questions that I get. And from a playing standpoint, not necessarily how to handle themselves on the floor, but what to do off the floor. So the entrepreneurial spirit, how much risk should you take? How much money should you save? And from a mentoring standpoint, those are the questions that I get, and that's the advice that I try to give the most.
Mm-hmm. Because I maintain, Isiah, that players today, in terms of just skill work, and everybody's got a personal trainer and a shooting coach, they've got all of that. So I mean, if there's access to anything, they have the opportunities to improve and become more proficient players. I'm wondering, do they have the same amount of structure in the sound advice in the realm you just spoke of, it off the court, in terms of managing not just the finances, but the lifestyle and the family and the people around you and all that? I wonder, have you evaluated what needs more attention for a player once you get into the league and have a career with some staying power? Is it more of you got to maintain a certain level on the basketball court, or is it managing all the things around that?
Yeah, I would say that if I was to evaluate what this industry, what this current player has or lacks that we had, I would say when we were in the league, there were always people around us who had participated in the league and experienced in the league and could tell you the do's and the don'ts. And the people that were actually, training you were actually, people who, had played in the league. So there's a lot of drill work that you can do to get your skill better. But, when you, like Mike Tyson said, all that stuff is good until you get hit. And those drills are good. But, then when there's a defender on you, and that defender is bigger, stronger, faster, and, that defender is not the cone or the chair, then what do? How do you get open? And what I see today is a lot of players don't have training staff around them that could share that knowledge with them. So there is a knowledge gap that is missing from a teaching standpoint, because what we had knowledge around us that could talk to us about the things that the coach can't teach. Now they're only limited to what their teachers are teaching them, so to speak. And a lot of them, what I see a lot of people around, a lot of the players, they don't have that knowledge. And when you look at a guy like a Steph Curry, who has been, so successful, and you look at a Klay Thompson, who has been so successful, even though I'm sure they have their own individual workout people, they got dads at home who have, won championships, been the best players and everything else. So there's a lot of knowledge that they get from their fathers that they bring to the court that the skill coach ain't teaching them.
Right. Yes, it's a weird dynamic now too. And I don't know, maybe it's just this generation. It seems like there's a lot more sons of former players now who are in the league. So there's kind of this, to me, you kind of had this second generation wave of stars. And there'll be more coming, obviously. There's going to be a lot more in the years to come. Do you appreciate the level of competitiveness of this era the way I do? For a while, I was like, I don't know if I like guys holding up jerseys and posing and I was like, I'm an '80s baby. I'm not sure that's in my wheelhouse, but I think about the competitive way that KD and the Warriors went at LeBron and the Cavs, or the way Kawhi Leonard's going about his business. There's a healthy dose of competitiveness in today's game that I think we kind of gloss over and act like, well, it's not knockdown, clothesline basketball, so therefore it's not as competitive. I don't believe that, and maybe I'm wrong, but I like the tenor and the tone of the competition in today's game.
I agree 100% with you, and I see highly competitive people. Now, I think what these highly competitive people understand that we didn't understand. Hey man, that jersey now is worth $200,000. Don't just throw it in the trash. Let me get that jersey. And by the way, if you put your signature on it and it's a game worn, so they understand that, and they have, and they figured out how to monetize it, which is cool. I got no problem with that. I look back and I say now, man, all the great players that I played with in the '80s, had I known what these jerseys and everything would be worth, game worn, hey, let's trade.
No doubt.
Can you imagine what a game worn exchange jersey between Jordan and myself now would be worth?
Oh my God.
And I guarantee you, he and I both would be happy with it.
Yeah, I bet. And obviously, in closing here, and like I said, I appreciate you taking some time, Isiah. I know you got a lot going on. Do you look back now and say to yourself, you know what? The past the past. You can't change it. There are a lot of us who are going to go to our graves upset, furious. My grandfather, rest his soul, being one of them, about you not being on the dream team. But all that water under the bridge, do you look back at your time in the game and just smile? Because there's no way anybody, even if you're a unbelievably talented player, can assume you're going to reach the heights that you reached and experience the things you did and been all the places you've been. You have to look back and smile at that, don't you? When you see what's been accomplished.
I look back and I smile, and I look back with awe, and here's why. And you and I, we've been around each other for a lot of years.
Mm-hmm.
When I do see Magic and Bird and Barkley, and I realize just how small I am, and how little I am, being and having accomplished what I accomplished in the game. They were blessed with size. They were blessed with 49-inch verticals and all that stuff. To be able to do what I was able to do at this size, I look back on it and I'm thankful, grateful, and I look back at it and I do smile.
Yes. You definitely went into the land of the giants, man, and slayed them. I often tell people, and I've seen the meme going around, the only person to defeat Larry, Magic, and Michael, and you and the teams that you led were the only ones to accomplish that. It's remarkable stuff that I hope we don't forget about or gloss over when we start evaluating the history of this game. To me, it's one of those things that needs to be acknowledged, man. I'm appreciative of your time, obviously, and all the stuff you share. As you know, man, I'm certainly hoping you and the family stay safe, and hopefully we get some basketball at some point down the road here. I don't know how you feel. I'm feeling optimistic, but I'm nervous, but I'm trying to be optimistic about it.
Hey, accurately stated. Optimistic and nervous.
No doubt. Well, listen, I appreciate you, Isiah.
Okay, appreciate you too.
All right,
Thank
man.
you.
Yes, sir. I always appreciate my conversations with Isiah Thomas. He's the first coach I covered when I started covering the NBA. He's in the headlines these days for a lot of things, but some of his best work is done, in the shadows. And I think that's something that people don't understand. He's been a mentor to countless players, that have come since he was playing. And I just appreciate him clearing the air a little bit here on the Hang Time Podcast, sharing a little bit, and talking, plain, like real talk for people to understand. He's not the image of him and the reality of who he is are so wildly different. I get to see that working with him and dealing with him as I have over the years, but I hope everybody else gets a better grasp on that, listening to him talk. As always, we appreciate you taking the time, diving in, hanging out with us here during this global pandemic. The Hang Time Podcast is trying to make sure we maintain a consistent level of output for you. My producer, Anthony Bonaparte, is grinding away as always. Appreciate him. For everybody here, the Hang Time Podcast. We'll see you next time.
This one is done, but in case you want another one, here's the links to all the fun from Sekou Smith's Hang Time Run. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, NBA.com/hangtime, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, Hoops fans.